I like this one. This one.
Oh gosh,
Oh no! Oh no! Was it splashy?
that was a splashy one. I said, "Damn, not Hill."
Oh
They fill it.
well,
They're so
we
generous over there.
they are so generous. Exactly, Chris. Exactly. We were just talking about how we have been just nod hilling it up over here. We love this local brewery so much. But we're practically a commercial for it at this point.
So true.
I was there twice this weekend and it was wonderful. And both of us just happened to be drinking Nod Hill beer. So,
Right.
yeah, no, it's good
Fine.
stuff. Yes.
Um,
Very nice.
yes, and somehow they get. I don't know how they do it, but they get more beer in there than even fits. I don't know how they do it because
Yeah.
you open it and there's beer coming out of it. And
Actually, before you even open it, somehow it's
it's like, how did they get the beer in there? How did they keep it in there? Because there's more beer than there is space in the can. I don't know. It's a magic.
you know, I can relate because I had an experience like that. I did open one up a little bit earlier this evening, and I put it in my fabulous little beer stein I got for Oktoberfest a few years ago. And it was one of those situations where you pour it and you're like, oh, now that's a full glass, but the beer keeps going. Like, I stopped pouring, but it kept, I guess I'm still as much as I enjoy beer, I guess I'm not quite as used to it as I should be. It was out of control. But that just shows you how alive these non-hill beers are and tremendously full.
They
Please,
are.
they need to pay us at this point, Chris.
That's so true. At least in beer, just like
Yeah. Absolutely. Mom says hi. Hey,
Hi,
Mom.
Mom. Hi,
We have
Dad.
some folks joining us. Fabulous. On Facebook, on YouTube. Wonderful. It's going to be a great night. It always is. Chris, it is now officially autumn.
It
As
sure is.
this past, midweek, Chris. Chris, what are your favorite autumn things?
Um, nothing. Nothing.
Nothing. Oh
Trying to think. Trying to think.
no.
I'm thinking the leaves. No, I can't stand the leaves falling. It's just
It's a
not
nuisance.
not because it's sad. It's because we have so many, and then it becomes this Herculean task
Yeah.
to to deal with these leaves. And
Just
then now
never
it's
ending.
cold, chilly, it's getting dark early.
Hmm.
Um, what's good? I don't know.
I
Um,
mean, I honestly think I agree with you. I love summertime and it is genuinely sad for me to see it go. But I have these fall activities that I love, like, the whole apple picking thing, the pumpkin stuff. I love I mean, it's really all food related. It's all like pumpkin spice everything.
pumpkin pie, the pumpkin. I do like pumpkin pie.
Pumpkin pie is great. It
I
is
love
really great. Jalinda Hockaday is joining us, and Beth Tillman. Hello, hello. Jalinda says, Happy autumn. Thank you, Jalinda. Wonderful.
very nice.
Yeah, autumn is, a lovely time for food. I had a coworker, I had this past week tell me that he loves pumpkin beer, and he's like the first person that I have ever heard of who said that they love it. Not that it was a fun novelty item, but that they loved it. And I was impressed. I was excited, and it made me want to try it again. It's been a few years. What do you think, Chris? Should I get some pumpkin beer?
Have at it. Have at it. Let me know how it is because I don't know. I mean, sometimes it's very subtle and that's fine,
Sure.
as long as it's not like super pumpkiny.
You're right. Like drinking,
It's just
bubbly
it's
pumpkin
just
spice
food.
water. Ooh.
Exactly. Like Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like a liquid pumpkin pie.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. Yeah, I think the thing I was saying a little while ago when we were talking about this is like, I like beer with food, and what do you pair pumpkin beer with that wouldn't make the food taste a little crazy? I mean, I guess you could put anything with a pretzel, but I mean, I don't still don't want my pretzels to be like mingling with the pumpkin spice flavor.
Tater tots.
Tater tots. That was good times, Chris. We shared a big old plate of tater tots at Not Hill. We are still not being paid by them in beer or anything. So, this is our audition, I suppose, Chris. But anyhow, it is past 8 o'clock now. Welcome, everyone, to FUMFA 67. We have with us two amazing, amazing writers, a FUMFA alum, Amie Souza Reilly, and a special guest, Kyle Potvin. And we are so excited to have them with us. They will share with us very soon. So I hope that you enjoy both of their readings, and make sure that you save your questions for the Q&A from approximately 9 to 9:30. Don't be shy. These are really incredible, very talented, very published people, and pick their brains with us. But before we get into that, Chris, what do we have coming up in the next few weeks?
Oh, let's see. So next week we get Jessica Tumio and
Nice.
Chris Abate. Jessica's an alum. And the week after that, we've got Heather Fremmer with her brand new book. Morrow Dowdle,
Awesome.
great, wonderful poet. The week after that, fall open mic night.
Fall open mic night.
So if any of you peoples out there want to participate in the fall open mic night, please let us know.
Please do. Our list is is wrapping up quickly, filling up fast.
It's filling up, so jump on it.
Yes, get in there.
Down the road, we've got Ray Jane and Owen Elphick. That's going to be a night of poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Then we got Spooky Night.
Spooky night.
Halloween.
Yes.
So
Halloween, horror, scary, creepy, themed pieces. And we really hope that you will be joining us and or watching wearing your Halloween costume, because Spooky Night is on Halloween night. Halloween is a Sunday this year. So we are going to have some Halloween fun together. And if you're interested in participating in that, get in touch and share your scary poems or stories or essays.
Everybody's got a scary story they can tell.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah,
or write something new, write something a little bit spooky for the first time and share it with us on the show. It'll be awesome.
That's right.
All right. Well, without further ado, let's get into our authors for the night. Once again, this is FUMFA 67, and we have with us Amie Souza Reilly and Kyle Potvin. We are going to get started with Kyle Potvin. Let's welcome her as I read her bio to you. Hello, Kyle. Welcome.
Hi, Katie. Hi, Chris.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you doing tonight?
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, we're so excited to have you. I was just telling the story a little while back about how I met you for the first time years back at the Westchester Poetry Conference when Kim Bridgeford was still over there. And it's been a pleasure to be your Facebook friend since then.
I can't believe it's been so long. And, and of course, missing Kim so much.
Gosh, yes. Yes. And just such a treat to have you with us tonight. So let me get to your bio here. I'm so sorry. All right, everybody. Kyle Potvin's debut full-length poetry collection is Lucen. Her chapbook, Sound Travels on Water, won the Jean Pedrick Chapbook Awards. She is a 2-time finalist for the Howard Nemerov Sonnet Award. Her poems have appeared in Bellevue Literary Review, Tar River Poetry, Rattle, Ecotone, the New York Times, and others. She's a peer reviewer for Whale Road Review you, and Kyle lives in southern New Hampshire. Hey, have the leaves changed color up there yet, Kyle?
They are just starting. It's going to be beautiful. It was a great day.
Wonderful. All right, Kyle, we're excited to hear you read, and we'll leave you to it.
Thanks so much, Katie. Thanks, Chris. And I'm really excited to be reading here with you guys today and to hear Amie read her work as well. I'm going to be reading today from my my new collection, which is called Loosen. And it is, it covers things like illness and loss and also hope, New York City, and lots of other things. Like a wasp in the wall. Go small. Shed the fur of your home and the lawn of gnawed bones. Don't whimper as your fingers loosen on Lessing and Murdoch and Kenyon. Go small, a drip down the drain. No mercy on what once promised something. You are light, unencumbered as the crystal glass you now fill. Your mother and grandmother drank from it too, with roses, buds, and blooms acid etched. With your fingertip, trace its story. Hear its bell-like toll. Now, sip. I've been thinking a lot about like misinterpretation. I had a friend send me a picture that was a total spoof. And I started thinking like, in 10 or 20 or 50 years from now, somebody's going to look at this picture and think that it's real, that this is in all seriousness. And I thought, how many times do we do that? It's human nature where we fill in narratives, but our end result isn't always an accurate depiction. Ghosts of Weston Street. The moon is shivered. Landscape lights their shade on the empty room. Wandering, I fold black into shadows. The world presses in, taut as a migraine. My steps groan. Heat bangs as my eyes are dragged to the door. A crack appears in a pane. Spidery, thin ice. If pushed, it will break. I must move forward, guarding what I know. My poor eyes adjust. A web, freshly spun, gleaming. I fear this is not my last misjudgment. Like many poets, I do seem to lurk in poems around mortality. This next one is one that I wrote after reading Sid Lee's book Here, which is a fabulous book. And it's interesting because just this week I was on a reading with Sandra Lim, and she has a great new book out. She's talking about reminding us how important it is to read, because you're reading poetry, it's spurring you on, it's helping you discover new techniques perhaps, or different ideas and themes. And so reading is a huge part of being a poet. Mollusk. Pink mucket, warty back, cat's paw. We were all endangered. Your mother, mine, a young traveler who never makes it home. Ming, a bivalve mollusk, lived 500 years. I weep for his longevity. This earth is ringed tight as a muscle. Forgive me, I have been thinking of death nearly since birth. I am soft-bellied. Take me first. Don't leave me burrowed, gasping for air. Mysteries of the Corn. Your priest of 20 years retires, then your hairdresser. Elephants become sacred, and the circus leaves town forever. Even the only queen you've known is blue, wearing sapphires from her dead father. Loss is the corn on your door. 16 rows, 800 kernels. You finger each like a rosary bead. Hail Mary, mother of yours, lost in plaques and tangles. Glory be to your Father, livelihood lost to her care. Hail, Holy Queen, watch over the teen shot near the corner, and for the other who died of conjecture. Our Father, remember the birch lost to infestation and the road around the lake no longer traveled. Each year the husk dries, decays a bit more, but you hang it anyway, a totem to stubbornness. After all, an ear to the ground is useless. You know what's coming. I have a weird kind of fascination with corn. I actually have another corn poem. And in the Q&A, perhaps, I'd love to hear if anybody else has that same kind of strange fascination, or what your obsessions are. What are you writing about? Themes or images that keep popping up all the time. Looking for the field where my friend once read a book on a cow's back. There's corn here, stalks, tall and tasseled. No cows. Where are the Holsteins, black and white as pages? Wrong field, the husks whisper. Uncertain of my direction, I twitch my nose trying to pick up a scent. Honeysuckle and dirt, too clean for what the city girl expects from cattle. Over here, over here. I enter the rows amazed. Peel back an ear, finger silk like choice. Read the kernels like a palm. Taste the golden cob tempts in buttery tones. But this may be field corn fed to cattle. Bite. In some places, yellow means caution. In others, courage. And this is a little bit of a different take on eating. No treachery of maggots. They eat us up, snack on the wounds of the world. Who can blame them for saving themselves? But think of this. We might live in the life cycle of a maggot, egg to maggot to fly. Let's rename them, something beautiful, something we want to be, a saint, a thinker, an artist. Use a word like Medjugorje, marginalia, Magritte. Yes, let's call them Magritte. Remember, ceci n'est pas une pipe. This is not a pipe. This is a poem. Thank goodness this is not a maggot, and this is not the end. I'm going to read a longer poem that is in 4 sections, and it encapsulates a lot of the themes that are in Lucen. And this is in blank verse, which is unrhymed iambic pentameter. Going under. 1. Each week they hooked me up and dripped a drug into my vein that took me to a world where everything was gone. No light, no sound, nor even recollection of a breath. I didn't mind the drifting off, the loss of faces loved and those I barely knew, or words the way they failed me, like a plunge in icy water stops the heart mid-beat. I sat beside one woman several times, our chairs reclined, ivy poles standing guard. We talked of books. She handed me the one she read, its author her good friend. As I accepted this last gift, my tongue softened into clay, a potter molding it. I think, I hope, I said, I'm going on. She looked as if she envied my escape. 2. I walk into a dive and sit alone. Another formless body at the bar. The others stare until I start to drink. They soon forget I'm not a regular. I sink into the stool, no history. I could be anyone from anywhere. Hint, do you know my mother's maiden name? I scratch a K into the wood and leave. Outside, I disappear again. The streets are full of people wearing black. I blend in with my monochrome, long jacket, jeans, and leather boots, an average-looking girl. No threat to anyone. Just don't look up. They'd read a novel in my eyes, blue eyes. My parents both have brown, a difference, it seems, that only I have cared about. 3. My doctor recommends a restaurant. Hungry, my family searches for the site. My tongue can taste branzino from the grill, tomatoes, olive, spritz all aperol. The decades pass. 10 years since I was sick, and 30 since I first explored this place. Those years I felt the need to leave my home and disappear into another life. These streets could hide you for millennia. The Aqua Alta washes clues away. My sons are almost at that age. They're here, but soon they're on their own. Will they return? We lose our bearings in the alleyways. Ahead, a wooden bridge may take us there. Wait here, I say, and cross the bridge myself. I see the way. I wait for them to come. 4. The beach chairs empty line the spit of sand. They watch like critics poised to write reviews. My number soon will come. I follow loons, their ballet anguished with their mournful call. One time I knew each step of their routine, but now I'm bored and scatter them away. I wade in noisily. Small rocks don't hurt my feet. I dive, emerge, and start my dance. A practiced breaststroke comes to me from pools and lakes, tai klongs and seas. I am surprised it is a welcome thing, the way the muscles memorize the past and share it differently. I float onto my back. A kick, a wave, a finger steadies me. The glare's not harsh. A rush of water drowns my face. I gasp. Now's not the time to fall beneath the waves. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer back in my early 40s, and I did write a lot of poetry, read a lot of cancer-inspired poetry then, and I've unfortunately been healthy ever since, but a lot of friends and relatives have gone through cancer, and so the cancer poems continue. So these are a couple of the newer ones. And I said, in the book, there's blank verse, there's sonnets, free verse, and this is a sonnet. The hard work of dying. The hospice nurse explained the letting go. Give her space to do the work of dying. On the sill, a green heirloom tomato, brought in before the frost, sat there, sighing. Or was that me, not knowing what to say? Don't ask her things. Such grief and giving up exchanges. Back off engagement. That way we help her go. Tea grows cold in my cup. 10 days since Emma took a sip of tea or ate a slice of grape. She sleeps while rain whispers a soothing chatter. The oak tree clears its throat, weeping acorns in the drain. Yellow snapdragons brighten up the room. A day from now, they'll see a second bloom. And one character or person really that appears in a couple times in Lucen is Jane Kenyon. And she is a poet, also from New Hampshire, who had leukemia, and she died in her 40s. I just find that her work really resonates with me. So she was in that very first poem, and she's in this one as well, as two friends lost to cancer, all three in their 40s. Waiting for results. I am Jane. I am Ellen. I am Julia. I am smoke in the throat, blowing simple rings, rising, rising, rising. There she goes, then her and her. I said I would remember them, but will I? What if the breast is guilty again, or the toe with its dirty cells? And I'd like to finish with one last poem. It's the title poem of Lucen. And this is in sections, and each stanza starts a different section of the book, and then the poem is reprised at the very end. It was an ekphrastic project, and so this is the beautiful painting by Brenda Wilbert, who inspired the poem. The former poet laureate of New Hampshire, Alice Vogel, connected us for an ekphrastic project. And so I was so thrilled to work with Brenda and with her beautiful artwork. And just before I'll close with this one, and I just want to say thank you so much, Katie, and for having me here, and Chris, and Amie, so excited to hear you read. Thank you all for coming. Lucen. For years, I suffer snarls in my expensive necklace. I wear these knots daily. On a city street, a self-proclaimed shaman stops a woman. You have a knot too tight for me to remove. She opens her wallet to learn more. String around your finger, knotted to remember the thing you can't forget. Reef knot, sheet bend, clove hitch, bowline. Learn to tie and untie each. A doctor closes a wound, sees red and gold above the body. This is good. The young woman will heal. Red-headed woodpeckers, 2, dance around a tree. This means the tree is likely dead, my husband tells me. I picture them holding a garland between their beaks, tying a storybook bow around the trunk. For 30 years, the woman carries the knotted sutures inside her. One day, she realizes they dissolved decades ago. A friend explains how to remove the knots from my silver chain. I choose needles, one point anchoring, another teasing apart the tightness. Reposition, tug, reposition, tug. The knot loosens. So easy. Thank you so much.
Kyle! Gorgeous, powerful, like heartbreaking in the most beautiful ways.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing these incredible poems with us. And are all the ones that you shared from Lucen?
They are, yes.
Awesome.
And that's it's by Hubble Book Books. So
yes, everybody, do the right thing. Go out there, get Lucen. Absolutely gorgeous. And we just heard, the title poem right there, just incredible imagery. And I know that feeling. I've done that before. And
it's like a miracle, that little trick to get those knots out.
And I think that is part of what's so powerful about that metaphor, is that it really feels like it's something impossible, but, with the right level kind of strength and patience and focus, and you're
Yeah.
able to do that. Kyle, just absolutely gorgeous stuff. And I have so many questions for you in the Q&A. And you shared so many poems in form with us. And that's a real treat to get to talk to a formalist poet. And we've had several guests on here also from the Kim family. Who have been able to share more about that. Are all of the poems in Lucin in some kind of form?
Yes. I mean, free verse I consider, another tool.
Yes.
There are a number of free verse poems in there, but blank verse, syllabics, sonnets, a number of sonnets, some other kind of, I mean, I didn't make them up, but they're kind of forms, so there's that's a lot of things. Well, you know how it is. We like playing in form, right? Form.
Absolutely. And yes, absolutely, free verse is a form. I want to insult anyone. Also, that's what I write in pretty much all the time. But that is so wonderful, Kyle. Thank you so much for sharing all of those poems with us. Just incredibly powerful. You got to later tonight jump on Facebook, hop into YouTube, and just see all of the love and comments from your reading. And everybody out there, get your questions ready for Kyle for the Q&A. But it is now time for us to bring up. Oh yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Kyle. All right, so let's bring up Amie Souza Reilly. Fabulous. Welcome, Amie.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We are so thrilled to have you. You are a FUMFA alum. Tell us, Amie, when did you graduate?
July.
Oh,
congratulations.
She's brand spanking new.
I'm brand new. Yeah.
Brand new FUMFA alum. Amazing. Chris and I are from the inaugural cohort.
Awesome.
Which Chris likes to call the best cohort. No, we are, we're so delighted that we get to meet so many people that we didn't have the chance to study with, or because of quarantine, etc., life limitations, have the chance of meeting yet. So we are so excited to hear from you tonight.
Thank you and Kyle, I have so much to step up to. Those were fantastic poems. What a wonderful opening to tonight. Thank you so much.
Incredible poems, just so incredibly vivid and incredibly moving. But Chris, you share with us Amie's bio.
Bio time.
Biotime.
Amie Souza Reilly has an MA in English Literature from Fordham University and an MFA in Creative Nonfiction from, you guessed it, Fairfield University. The former writer of the Adroit Journal's Feminist Fridays column, and her other work can be found in Catapult, Smoke Long Quarterly, Barron, Pithead Chapel, edited by our friend Kim McGowan, who was on here a while ago, and elsewhere, including Wigleaf's top 50 list of stories under 1,000 words. She lives in Connecticut with her husband and son and teaches in the Department of Languages and Literature at Sacred Heart University. Welcome, Amie.
Welcome, Amie.
Thank you.
Have fun.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you to everyone who's here. I've been trying to put together a collection of short stories, and they're all sort of set in the same place but span a lot of years and sort of cross family, and I've been trying to play with fiction and sestina, so like repeating images and phrases, and all the stories in the collection so far kind of stem from this first one that I'd like to read tonight. That's currently going by the title Astral Catastrophes, but changes all the time. João Gustavo turned 60 on July 11th, 1969. He hummed the happy birthday song to himself through the toothpick in his teeth as he packed the trunk of the car. His back had a premature curve. His spine nodded to the left from years of carrying the town's mail, from years of carrying a piece of shrapnel in his hip, from years of all the ways carrying is like caring. Inside their house, his wife, Maria Alice, was tossing odds and ends into a worn bag. Their suitcases were already packed. That morning, she'd woken Gus with a kiss on his eyelids and breakfast in bed, all of his favorites, Canadian bacon and double-yolked eggs fried in butter, a slice of cold cantaloupe. He'd kissed her back, his breath warm against her neck. July 11th was not only Gustavo's birthday, it was also their wedding anniversary. Inside his pocket, Gus had hidden the gift he'd planned to give Alice when they arrived at the first stop on their journey. It was a moonstone pendant to commemorate their trip. They were going to Florida, to the Kennedy Space Center, in order to see the Apollo 11 launch. Every few minutes, he patted his pocket to be sure it was still there. After their wedding ceremony, their 20-year-old faces shiny as garden-plucked eggplants, Gus had carried Alice over the threshold of their new home in Leiria, Portugal, and said to her, "Today, I feel like I was born again." "I surely hope you don't think I'm your mother," Alice winked behind her veil. "Of course not," he said, removing the veil and placing a cigarette into her mouth. "I just mean that everything feels so new, like I'm breathing air for the first time." The concentric circles of cigarette smoke Alice blew toward the ceiling hung in the heat, hovering like halos when she bent down to remove her shoes. She sat on his lap, and Gus made a ring with his thumb and middle finger, placed it over her kneecap, moved the bony plate in a circle. They had no way of knowing then that they were living liminally in the space between wars, between losses. Though maybe whenever happiness settles into our bones, it's only a respite between tragedies. They had both grown up in Leiria, which was caught between a river and the ocean on a cobblestone road that turned like a W. Small gatherings of trees grew in the bends of the road, their rutted bark smelling like cloves. These patches of forest terrified Alice when she was a child. The trembling ways the leaves shook, how the air turned suddenly cold, made her anxious about what hid in the dark. When they began dating, just after high school, Alice told Gustavo about how much she feared what might be in those trees, and he laughed at her. She slapped his hand, angry he hadn't taken her seriously. He kissed her chin as she stood in front of him. "I'm sorry," he said into the lump in her throat. "I only laughed because that shaking might have been me. I used to play in those trees. I used to see you running underneath. So, see?" He stood on his toes, rubbed his thumb across the line on her forehead. There was never anything to be afraid of. Gustavo ate his breakfast propped up against the pillows, sleep lines pressed into his face like a mantilla. Alice placed her coffee mug on the nightstand, climbed back into her side of the bed, and helped herself to his bacon. Gus dipped his cantaloupe into the yolk, watched the ooze spread across the plate, flecks of pepper like stars gathering at the edges. He put his foot over his wife's so they were holding ankles. "Happy anniversary, my love. Are you excited?" he asked, a drip of yolk on his chin. "I am, Gus," she said, patting his knee, though she moved her ankle out from beneath his. After breakfast, Alice trudged through the house, dragging her feet as if they were not her own. She stood in front of their bed, thought about dolphins and Ernest Hemingway and how wide the trunk of a palm tree might be. Alice opened the bag until its hinges cried out and filled it with what she thought they might need. Hair tonic, a sewing kit, a salt shaker that closed with the twist of a lid. It wasn't that Alice didn't want to go to the moon launch, or that she wasn't awed by the idea of men in space, but she had not seen the ocean since they'd left Portugal decades ago. The lake was her home now, where trees were planted far apart, the water never waved high enough to topple ships, and the air never got thick enough to suffocate their lungs. In Florida, she feared they would be exposed to the sea and the heat they had worked so hard to escape from. They were only 8 years old when Gustavo first saw Alice from the trees. His father had left to fight in the Great War, and Gus spent the hours between school and dinner sitting in the branches. The rustling of the leaves reminded him of waves, and waves reminded him of his father, who taught him how the moon pulls the tides which pull the fish, which pull the fishing lines they cast over the edge of their wooden boat. After he died, the moon felt as much like home to Gustavo as his home did. distant and familiar. Sometimes, in the highest parts of the trees, he would close his eyes and rock the branches, swearing he could smell the clove from his father's pipe. And that is when Alice would dash through the tangles of trees that lined the curvy road without stopping to breathe, not noticing the sad boy above. When he saw her running, he thought of geese, the way her knees kicked up so high beneath her skirt, the way her head jutted out in front of her body as if trying to escape her neck. He thought about the sails on ships, about the way dough rises beneath his mother's kitchen towels, the swell of it in front of the fire. The next year, when the Spanish flu invaded his mother's lungs and pushed her to her death, Gustavo remembered seeing Alice run beneath him, and he wished he'd climbed down to join her. The car was nearly packed. From the kitchen, Alice noticed the line of sweat seeping through Gus's yellow shirt. She watched as he patted his front pants pocket, removed the toothpick from his teeth, and placed it on the hood of the car. Alice lifted the fabric of her skirt to wipe her hands, twisting it between her fingers, something her mother had always scolded her for. She dropped her skirt as if she'd heard her mother, then smoothed the apron of creases she had worried into the fabric. Alice grew up hating her nose and often covered her face with her hands. This made it difficult for others to hear her when she spoke or to see her mouth's expression. She became weary of repeating herself and so spent a lot of time alone. Not alone exactly, but with the dog her father gave her. He was small and mud-colored, unremarkable except that one eye was brown and one was blue. His snout was a stub, his paws too big for his legs, and he followed her around with a sense of duty, like a mother. Her father brought the puppy home the same day Portugal entered the war. It was meant to soothe Alice in his absence, to distract her from her fears, to comfort her in some small way from the destruction of war and the threat of influenza moving closer to their town. Because she was so young, Alice had no concept of how long her father would be gone, or what war and pandemic viruses were capable of. What she understood was that as the puppy got bigger, her hair grew longer, and her mother became thinner and started biting her nails while staring for long minutes out the window over the small kitchen sink, her eyes squinched at the horizon. It had been 3 months since her father left when Alice sat at the table, refusing to eat the eggs her mother made for breakfast. They congealed on her plate. She watched the back of her mother's head, her dark hair a nest silvered with strands that appeared to be lit from inside her skull. There was a thud against the window, soft but tragic, when a bird flew straight into the glass. Only then did her mother turn around to see Alice still poking at the eggs on her plate. It was a mourning dove, Alice told her mother. They aren't very smart, the way they always fly into things. You're right, they aren't, her mother nodded as if she'd just woken up. I wonder if the earth weighs more when they hit the ground. Alice didn't know what her mother meant, but she knew better than to ask. Do you think he'll be home today? She whispered, giving her mother the choice to decide whether or not to hear her. Maybe, she said, and then a little louder, I do, so be sure to comb your hair. But he never did. A fly landed on Alice's eggs, its sticky-bottomed feet making the tiniest indentations on the surface of the yolk. Last Christmas, Alice and Gus's grown-up children gave them a telescope. It stood now in their bedroom window, the card still tied to the tripod. Dear Mom and Dad, Merry Christmas. Maybe you'll see the man who lives on the moon. We've heard it's made of cheese. Ha ha. Love, Anna and David. Gus spent more time peering through it than Alice did. Around the window, Gus had taped newspaper articles of JFK's promises to America. We choose to go to the moon. As he looked through the lens, Alice sat behind him, watched the arc of his spine point toward the sky, and listened to him talk about fishing with his father, stories she'd heard countless times, but never tired of. As he wondered aloud what it would be like to be there on the moon, to touch it, it could be ice or dust. Alice thought about how woodpeckers hop along the trunks of trees, how, for fractions of seconds, they don't hold on to the bark, not flying, but not falling either. Alice called Gus in for tea. He turned and smiled so widely his ears seemed to leap from his head. He came in and said, We're almost ready to go. Can you believe it, Alice? America is landing on the moon. Not America, Gus, just a few men. A few very great men, Gus said, the bow of his upper lip a Valentine heart over his mug. Alice reached for his thigh under the table, squeezed as if she were testing a melon. Did you call the kids? Tell them we were leaving? They called us. David first, then Anna. Anna says Florida is so hot, even our ankles will sweat. Alice stood, kissed the top of her husband's head, thinking she needed to look for a pocket knife to add to the leather bag. Before she walked away, Gus swept his hand across her bottom. 40 years you've made me happy, he said, and she shimmied against his palm. The first time Gus spoke to Alice was 10 years after he'd seen her run through the trees. She was 18, crying on a bench, twisting the front of her skirt. Gustavo was walking home from the market carrying a slab of tuna wrapped in paper. When he stopped, his hat cast a shadow over Alice's eyes. She covered her face, 2 hands over the tip of her nose and her mouth, her sob making a terrible sucking sound. "Você está bem, señorita?" he asked, putting down the fish, reaching in his pocket for a handkerchief he didn't have. She blinked so many times he thought she might be dumb. He asked her again if she was all right. "I'm sorry," she said. "It's just, you look like him," she said. "You have Tiago's face. He also had one blue eye. And your nose." And then, looking down at Gustavo's feet, which appeared larger because he wore his father's old shoes, "Your feet are big too." Gustavo pushed on his nose, a stub compared to Alice's, and thought for a moment that her lover had died. "I'm not Tiago, though," he said, reaching out his hands. "I'm Gustavo." Alice didn't take his hand. "I know you're not him, but your face." "Do you want to touch my face?" he asked, cocking his head to the side, half looking to see if anyone was watching, and half hoping she would put her hand on his cheek. "I would love to," she said, reaching up into the hair behind his ears. She pulled Gustavo's face closer, moved her hand away from her nose, stuck it into his hair. "You don't smell like Tiago," she said, the tears rising again in her eyes. "He smelled like mushrooms and wet dirt. You smell like soap." "He was such a good boy," she said, and for an instant Gustavo was relieved. She was not grieving a lover. But then he realized it must be worse. A younger brother, a cousin. "He had a twist in his stomach," she said. "There was nothing we could do. My mother shot him this morning. We buried him in the yard." "She shot him?" "She had to. My father died in the war. It was the most humane thing to do." Gustavo looked around again, now hoping there was someone he could tell about this woman who'd shot her son. Alice reached into her sleeve and pulled out a dog collar. "Smell this, you see? I miss him. He was a gift from my father." And the relief of realization, he noticed the goose curve of her neck, remembered the smell of cloves in the forest. "Oh, Gustavo, I haven't even told you my name. I'm Maria Alice." Beneath the puff of her eyelids, Gustavo saw in her Gustavo saw in her eyes the light of the shifting moon, felt a tug in his chest that promised to crack his ribs. The hollow between her thumb and wrist was the color of fresh honey. He stopped himself just before he licked it. Alice heard a hum deep inside her ear canal that made her think of bees. It threatened her equilibrium, made her delirious and dizzy. Her breath felt swollen. The tuna was forgotten on the bench when Alice dropped one hand from her face in order to hold Gustavo's, which felt as warm and safe as a baby. They had lived in their house in the tiny town of Essex, New York, since 1932, 4 years after Alice's mother died, 3 years after they were married, 2 years after a fire pushed them away from the town they'd grown up in, 1 year before Portugal's crumbling monarchy gave way to a rising dictatorship. When lightning had hit the trees in the W of their road, the tallest one snapped with such force that its roots tore out a disk of earth. The flames ripped their way through the center of the trunk, jumped from the leafy fingers of the branches onto the woodpile Gustavo had stacked just far enough away from the house that spiders couldn't come in. Then it chased the dried grass and clung to the side of their home. The noise of it all woke them first. Then the smell assaulted their noses. The fists of smoke punched into their lungs. Though neither of them said it, they both feared the fire meant a return of the war that had killed both of their fathers. They fled from their home into the nearby, still empty house where Alice's parents had once lived, covering their heads with their arms, unsure what might fall from the sky. The firemen came, but they were too late. Alice and Gustavo climbed up into her childhood bedroom, not speaking as they stripped off their sooty clothes and dropped them out the window. Gustavo wanted to say something comforting, but nothing came out, his mouth a soundless hole. He wrapped his arm around his wife, pushed her stomach so that she was as close to him as possible. In bed, wearing their grief like a blanket, they knew they would leave here, this place where war and sickness and fire had become as familiar as skin. They settled in Essex because Gustavo's brother had gone to America 5 years earlier, had moved up north and settled in Poughkeepsie. Gus and Alice stayed with him there after they arrived, practicing their English against the chill that was always threaded into the breeze. Gus worked with his brother at the woolen mill. Alice stayed in the house and made quick friends with the neighbors. They spent their summer evenings watching local baseball and learning to drive. When they saved and borrowed enough money to afford a car and a place of their own, they left. They followed I-87 north until, at the crest of a hill, they saw Lake Champlain poke its glassy belly out from the Adirondacks, and they knew. The next exit was for Essex, which sounded to Alice and Gus like success. The lake reminded them just enough of the ocean, while the mountains around its edges let them feel as if they were walled off from the past. They found a small house with a big front porch, settled their few trunks into the living room, and made a bed out of blankets on the cold wood floor. Gus got a job as a mail carrier, the first the town had ever hired, and he walked through the hills every day pouring good news into the mouths of mailboxes on those wide American streets. Alice worked for the ferry, standing each day in the small wooden hut that smelled like pennies, listening to the sounds of buoys smacking against the rocks and collecting money from passengers on their way to Vermont. David was born 5 years later, round in the face with legs like a frog's, and 2 years after that, Anna arrived, dark-haired with one brown eye and one blue, and pointy as a bird. Alice no longer covered her nose with her hands, for they were full of the impossibly perfect fingers of her children. And then the mail started to get heavy. The newspaper came, covered in photos that demanded they remember where they came from. Though Portugal was neutral, the world was returning to war. Alice and Gus watched dotted lines on maps, whispered the word Nazi to each other across the table. The mountains seemed smaller when they looked out the window. Gus went to fight with the Americans. The morning he left, the air blew in cold off the thick black lake. His family stood in a row in their front yard. Gus put his hat on his 7-year-old son and whispered something so softly into Anna's ear that she couldn't hear him. He kissed Alice long and slow, so long David started to giggle, and when he finally pulled away, he said, "I'll be home before your lips cool off." Gus was in France for 9 months when he caught a shot in his left hip. He and 3 other men had been huddled inside a ditch several hundred yards away from their war tent, on their way to search a farmhouse for gin. But when they reached the halfway point between the tent and the farm, the rumble of planes vibrated deep inside their intestines, and there was nothing to do but duck. They braced themselves, but nothing happened. Even after the sky turned dark and silent, the men lay still, unsure whether it was safer to go back to the tent or move forward toward the house. They emerged from the slit in the earth at dawn, wet and sleepless, and headed toward the farm. Before they entered the barn, a flock of starlings flew from a twisted oak tree. Once inside, they found a cold ham and a jug full of wine. The men put down their guns and helmets and watched the sun rise higher above the hills. The sound of the next fleet of planes caught them off guard. Death did not seem possible at this hour of the day. The planes dropped a series of bombs onto the farm, onto the tent in the distance, onto the hills that once looked like the back of a sea serpent. The roof of the barn became a hole. A piece of shrapnel sliced deep into the crest of Gus's pelvis. One of Gus's friends survived, though both of his arms were badly broken. The other 2 men were dead, their blood purpling the ground. Gus yelled out, but only once. The pain in his hips shot up his spine, down his jaw, rattled his front teeth, which had chipped. He closed his eyes and dreamt he and Alice were inside the ferry booth, balanced on top of an elephant, walking around in circles. His socks didn't match, and she laughed. He awoke in a bed among a row of beds, the taste of glue on his tongue. Gus watched the feet of nurses pacing, and he remembered how he'd cradled his children when they couldn't sleep. On either side of him, men bloodied and wounded, a smell like a braid of alcohol, sweat, and sulfur. His stomach rolled over on itself. His father had died in the First War. His mother died from the flu. And although he thought for a moment the tapping he heard was footsteps, he was able to cock his head enough to watch a little black bird hit its beak on the window pane. "Why would you want to come in here when all of us want to get out?" he asked it. A vision of Alice, sitting on a bench, crying over her dead dog, spread over him like the petals of a blooming peony. At home, Alice had taken to staring out the window and making runny eggs for their children. She told them the same story night after night, a Portuguese folk tale about why dogs sniff bottoms, which always made them laugh. Then all three of them slept together in her and Gus's bed. She got them a puppy from a farm on Gus's old mail route and brushed their hair in the mornings, their dark hair wrapping around her gray ones in the bristles. Though he was in pain and his journey home was long, on the day he returned, Gus walked home from the ferry hoping to surprise his family. With each lumbered step, he folded the war into small squares and put them into his pockets. When he arrived at the house, Alice was in the yard with the children wearing a blue dress the same color as his eye. The lake stilled behind her. The sun dropped onto the clover and the grass. His boots crunched the gravel in the driveway and the puppy barked. David and Anna were throwing a hula hoop into the air, and it dropped and rolled towards Gus's feet. Gus dropped his bag, and a swarm of small flies buzzed over a pot of pansies. Alice ran toward her husband, and the children stood in front of their father, creeping closer as if they were afraid he'd disappear, and then they held each other until Anna said she was hungry. The last thing Alice packed in the bag for Florida was a fold-up umbrella. She put it into the car and then stood still, her hand hovering in the air until a twitch in her cheek seemed to wake her, and she got into the car. "We're going to the moon, Alice," Gus said when he turned the key. The sun was warm and the windows were rolled down. The wind made it impossible for them to talk until they reached I-87. The ground flattened out through Massachusetts. Trees were replaced by buildings and steeples gray as harbor seals. In Connecticut, Alice watched the ocean wave past her window. "I don't know why I've been afraid to see the ocean again," she said, "when it's the land that always caused this trouble. Your parents, my parents, the wars, the sickness, the fire, it was always the land. It was always the hardness. Because, Alice, where we used to be, it felt like it was the sea that was holding us in." Maybe he was right or maybe he wasn't, but Alice was tired and she let herself fall asleep. They stopped in Bridgeport, rented a small room at a motel called Captain's Cove, ate fried clams, and wiped the grease on paper napkins. After dinner, they walked down to the dock. At the end of the pier, Gus gave Alice the pendant. She held it flat on her palm and turned it to watch the pink shades of the stones swirl beneath the final fingers of sunlight. It was so beautiful she wanted to bite it. For a moment, Gus thought she might drop it into the sea. "Gus, thank you," she said, kissing the space between his eyebrows. They walked back to their room with their arms around each other's waists. In bed, they stared through the open window curtains. Alice held her husband's hand and said, "Gus, what do you think their mothers think of them going into space?" Gus didn't have an answer. He said, "Did you know Buzz Aldrin's mother's maiden name was Moon?" And the coincidence of it all made them laugh until they got the hiccups. In the morning, they drove through New York and New Jersey, mostly quiet, taking in the scenery. Through Maryland and Virginia, as they neared their next stopover point, Gus leaned over to Alice and asked, "What do you think we'll look like when we're old?" Alice looked at him, all 60 of his years whiskering from his eyes. "We will look like us, but shrunk." "Shrunk?" "Yes, shrunk. Small. Your back will get more crooked, and mine will curve towards yours. And maybe then we'll be the same height?" They were quiet again, their car part of the symphony of traffic. They marked each mile with a memory, thought about how a day becomes a blur, how even the worst of times can soften around the edges. Gustavo put his fingers around Alice's kneecap and looked at the East Coast as it slipped past their windows, and for a second, he thought that it felt more like Florida was coming right at them, rather than them driving toward it. He shook his head a little and asked, "Do you think that it's funny how we are on a journey to watch some others leave on a further journey?" Alice looked down at his hand on her knee, the circle of the kneecap pale, her husband's hand so dark. "Gus, my knee looks like the moon," she said, and he looked. He looked down at the kneecap he had seen every day for decades and thought Alice, thought moon, thought thank you, and he didn't look up in time to see that a truck had pulled in front of their shiny Buick, and he did not hear Alice screaming stop, screaming break. He only saw the chasm of her mouth, and she watched the pupils of his eyes dilate, one blue iris and one brown, the two of them together, their darkest places opening. And behind Alice's head, he saw a bird drop straight out of the sky, as if it caved to gravity, as if it knew it would no longer be the only one to see the place where sky turns into space, as if it knew that gravity would no longer hold down humans. It fell the way a monster slips eternal beneath a lake that is always cold, the way a baseball drops in left field, the way mail falls through a slot. It fell the way a mother's face falls when she opens the front door to hear the news that her husband isn't coming home. It fell the way a clutch of trees will catch fire and fall, the way a burning house will fall, the way a man will fall in war, the way a man will fall in love, the way a man will fall. And just beside her ear, Alice heard a fly buzz, and she thought of eggs congealed on a plate, and the smoky shadows left behind by mourning doves who fly into kitchen windows, and the soft sponge feeling of her insides after giving birth. She thought of Tiago's stomach swollen with air, Gus's spine swerving like a dance, her children's heads thrown back, arms held out, spinning in circles until they fell, soft bottoms and pointy elbows mashing into the earth, which was also spinning, kept in space by something as strong as it is invisible. And she thought about the ferry, gliding across the slick of the lake, held in place by mountains and closed in by the sea. Thank you.
Oh my God,
Wow.
Amie. Oh my God.
Thank you, guys.
Just absolutely, like, totally captivating, heartbreaking, making it very hard for me to be a hostess right now. Tears. That's like the highest praise, because I know these people. I love these people. I've been with them for decades. In the space of the last, approximately 25 minutes. And
Right.
that was just such an incredibly gorgeous and powerful and moving piece. Thank you so much for sharing with us. It's incredible.
Oh, it's a real trick to, it's lifetimes in a short story. I mean, it's like a novel packed in there, and it totally works. Sometimes it doesn't work, but it was worked beautifully.
Oh my God, it was exquisite. And just absolutely beautiful. I mean, and we have so many people coming up in the comments, Amie, saying just how beautiful it was, just how remarkable, incredibly moving, just incredibly beautiful stuff. I was really holding on here. If I didn't have, hostess duties and like a lot of eyeliner on, I would be a mess.
This looks amazing.
Thank you. Well, I have to say, both both you and Kyle tonight. Let's bring Kyle back up, but both of you got me so bad, incredibly powerful and moving stuff, but and tragic, but in the most, exquisitely and powerfully expressed ways. Applause for Kyle Potvin and Amie Souza Reilly.
That was amazing. I mean, that whole ending, that poetic, amazing ending, and just the images throughout the whole story, and the eggs and the eyes and these things that trailed through were just really beautiful.
And the knee and the circles, all of these incredible images. It's so exquisitely put together. Oh God, just absolutely gorgeous. And Chris and I always mention that we make thoughtful choices. We do our best to put our two feature readers together, but we always find kind of a serendipitous similarity or resonance between them, and I feel like that both of you are kind of talking not about about death or the past, but in these incredibly vivid ways, in these incredibly living ways. And I there was this image of the tree, and we're like watching from the tree, and seeing someone's face, or seeing something about them who has passed in something that is presently living, and both of you really resonated with that, and just definitely made me cry, which is good. I like that, and that is the sign of incredibly powerful work. So Chris, right? Like
No, it felt
serendipity, the
yes,
similarity.
the flow between, part one and part two tonight. It just felt like it was
Ooh,
somehow you handed off the baton, Kyle, to Amie, and it was the same race in a way, but it was,
yes.
obviously
Yeah,
different.
it was really interesting too. And just even like little small things like the woodpecker, or the eyes, or,
Yes, yes,
things like
yes, yes,
that.
yes.
It was interesting.
Yes, absolutely. And these small little images that totally like resonate between you two. Exactly, Kyle. Exactly. And just such like exquisite style. So like excellently written pieces from both of you. But let me stop gushing and allow to get started with our questions, because you both have so much that you can share with us. Audience, get those questions in the chat. Don't be shy. We have a brand new first question that we debuted last week, and Chris, I will leave you to it. I love our new first question.
This is a Russ Siller memorial question, because my late friend Russ, who was a wonderful writer, would ask this question when he found out, that anybody was a writer, and he would turn to them and he would say, "Kyle, how has writing changed your life?"
Good question, huh? Wow. It's always been part of my life. And so I think that has been the biggest part, is just always knowing that it's there. And just there's something magical about the creative process, and the ability to kind of synthesize the world through writing, in my case, poetry. But so, yeah, I mean, I think it is just, it's part of who I am, and always has been pretty much. I remember, I was writing as a kid, and recently found like this little poetry book that, was hand done with little pictures and things from, I don't know, what, 7 or something. So way back from then. So yeah, I mean, I think just that love of poetry has just been so important.
Right. It's been, less of a kind of force acting upon you and more of just like who you are and who you became and what you decided
Right.
to focus on.
Right. Didn't change your life. It kind of
Made it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank goodness.
Awesome. Awesome.
Amie.
I'm really glad Kyle went first on that one.
It's a pretty like epic question.
Yeah. And I thought that I would have time to come up with an answer listening to yours, but I didn't. I think, like so many other people, and I mean Joan Didion, right? Like I write to figure out what I'm thinking. She said it much better, but that same thing, that idea of like, I can't quite figure out what's happening here, but if I write it down, the connections kind of appear. So.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that makes total sense to me. Yeah. Just absolutely. Like, if I write something down, I remember it,
Yes.
An appointment or something, whereas I'll forget it if I don't write it down. There's something about that process that helps things become concrete, and more real, even if it's just words on a page.
Yeah. And Amie, that does kind of remind me of that in your piece, there are sort of these like kind of like perfectly echoing and repeating, images, that like the egg, the fly, the bird, the circle, the moon. And I almost wonder, how much of that was sort of as meticulously planned as it was kind of written in kind of a state of flow, and then you found it and then we're like, yes, let's follow that. Like I think there's this aspect of like, actually, let's sit down to write this, and you find these images, you find the associations. How, I wonder, just to like tag a little extra question onto your answer here, in writing that piece, how much of those aspects of it were something that you found in the writing of it?
You know, when Kyle said before, when she was doing her reading and she was talking about like being obsessed with corn and having a
Yes, which we need to get back to.
Yeah, I think I have some. I actually also have a maggots thing, so I'm like, oh my god!
I have an egg thing.
So and when you read your maggot poem, I was like, oh, I love maggots too.
Yeah, somehow Chris and I knew there's something resonating through the universe between all of us.
Yeah.
You two need to, just hang. Talk maggots.
We need our nod hill, and we need to hang.
Oh my god! Kyle, yes. Okay, I'm so sorry. Amazing moment right there. Yeah, Amie, continue. Amie, continue.
I don't remember the question anymore. Lord.
You love maggots, but the images, the repeating images.
You know, I think I had like a weird thing about astronauts forever, and my paternal grandparents actually died in a car accident like that driving to Florida, but I don't know any of the story. Like, there's no history. It's just a thing that, so I wanted to kind of solve that. And then,
oh, wow.
So I don't know, the moons, and then I don't know. I feel like everybody leans on birds, but I did too.
They're, a great thing to lean on.
Birds are good.
Yes, indeed. Oh, that was fabulous. What an excellent new first question that we have, Chris. We wouldn't have had any of those moments,
That's right.
Yeah. I have a question for Kyle. It was just mentioned. I have kind of a very, very poetry question, but I'm dying to circle back to what you said about corn and like and how you mentioned during your reading, like you have this little almost like obsession, this fascination with, and we, how each of us as writers, or even just as people, we have these like things that sort of just fascinate and delight us. Although they're not necessarily things that people might normally be particularly fascinated by. Elaborate, please. Would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have different types of obsessions in my writing, but one of them has been corn for whatever reason. Like, I find corn is very wise. I don't know why. I feel like it's, somehow it has, and like, I feel like it's like embodies some kind of ancient knowledge or something that I just want to kind of get to in my writing. I don't know. It's kind of a weird thought, but so for a while, corn kept coming up, and for Mysteries of the Corn, my husband and I actually had, and it kind of goes to that idea of like misinterpretation too. So for years, like when we moved into our house, we got this little corn to hang on the front door. And so every year we would hang it, and we lived in the house for 23 years. So the corn was getting a little bit old, right? Like a little ratty on the ribbon, but we thought it was hilarious. So it was this huge joke for us that we were hanging our corn again. But the thing is that like people coming to the door were probably like, just get some new corn. You know what I mean? But anyway, so that's kind of was the impetus for this corn. But the corn, the idea of corn, and the rosary beads and things like that, it just something about it. It kind of Amie was talking about that, like just certain things stick in your brain, like the story of your grandparents, or and so that for whatever reason, the corn, I felt like it just kept staying in my brain. I felt like I had to use it as a metaphor for something, and that's how it came out in that case. And then, just, resurfaces every once in a while in other poems. I don't really know why I'm fascinated by it.
You're not from Iowa or something.
No. I'm really more of a city girl, but I don't know. Maybe that's why. Maybe because I'm, I don't know.
I love that. But but I kind of get that. I love how you said it represents wisdom. And, of course, there's this tremendous aspect of, culture behind corn. And then you have this lovely personal story. I get it, and I love that, and I love hearing about people's sort of little things like that. It ends up revealing so much.
Well, corn. I mean, corn is one of those, you don't think about corn, right? It's just corn. I mean, it's just so, ubiquitous, right? There's so much corn everywhere, but like you stop and look at it and think about it. Corn is actually like this weird complex thing.
Yeah.
It comes wrapped in this husk that you peel off, and then there's all these little right, and right, and when you talk about how many are there in a row or something or whatever you said, I said, wow, that's like one of those things you think about doing, like when you look at a piece of corn, like, I wonder how many are in there. I'm just gonna eat it, I'm not gonna count it.
I know what you mean. I really, really, really get this. You end up kind of like, staring at it for a while, and thinking about all kind of the mysteries of life. And it sounds silly, but I really, really get it. I love that. I love going there with that.
I read a book by Rachel Paston called In the Field, and it's kind of loosely based on the first woman who won a Nobel Prize in science for this. She would look at corn, and and it was related to DNA and things like that, genetics. So it was really fascinating. So again, I'm fascinated by this corn, and
I love this. This is definitely in one of our top 10 Q&A conversations already. This is
somebody else put an obsession out there. Come on.
So fascinating.
Children of the corn.
We're all chuckling, but it's also like really very true and totally fascinating, and I really get it. Amie, we and Kyle, we have comments, we have questions here that are coming in. Keep them coming, audience. But Amie, I would love to just kind of like jump back to you, and I know you had kind of very quickly mentioned kind of items of that nature that sort of fascinate you, but is there anything really in particular that comes around in all of your writing, like this fascination with the moon or astronauts or anything else?
Probably the moon for sure. Death. Dinosaurs, weird, like the stuff that you're obsessed with when you're a kid. Like a lot of dinosaur stuff happens.
Yeah.
And moon and space stuff.
Right.
So yeah. And then like the other short stories that I've been trying to do coming after this one, it's deer. Like it moves from like deer keep reappearing. So I guess maybe it's just all like nature and space and science. Earthy.
Nice. Fascinating. That is really fascinating. That is a cool like lens to like approach a body of work from. Like, what is this author really fascinated with? What are these like repeating like themes and images kind of, at that level, not, that's just very, very interesting to me. And now I'm trying to think like, what is that for me? So I'm going to be thinking about that a lot.
Okay, then get back to us on that.
I love that.
Sometimes we don't know till somebody points it out. And you say,
that's very true. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Ooh, I love this. I love this conversation. All right. So we have
let's do this.
So a comment has popped up from Emily Bryan, which I would just love to share. She said, "Thank you so much for your readings. I have a question for both of you about time. In Kyle's poem about the mollusk, I love the lines, 'We are all endangered.'" Yes, I put that in the chat. Yeah. "It seems like you are worried about time." It continues. She said, "And for Amie, how much did you plot out the timing of the story, or rather the pacing, the move from flashback to the compressed history to the incredibly slow and poetic moments, etc.?" So marinate on that. We'll jump back to, this is not exactly a question, but perhaps like a, tell us more about this this concern with time that we see in the "we are all endangered" line.
Okay, so well, I think that because I did have cancer, it's such a cliche, right? But time is short, and
No, it's true.
but it's true for a reason. Like it actually, you start to feel that, or at least I did. That you know what, we don't know how long we're going to be here. You just got to do what you want to do and move ahead and go for it. So I think that time does. I'm very cognizant of mortality, and not just my own, but everybody's. And always thinking about that. And just again, like going back to like being part of you. Like when I was in 5th grade, I wrote an essay on death, and I gave it to my mother to read, and I was very proud of it. I thought it was very well argued. And she never like commented on it.
It was like,
now I like, of course, like what kid writes an essay that for themselves on death, right? So I mean, I'm
you were concerned about it.
like, I thought it was interesting. I thought it was very, but anyway. So yeah, the idea that we're all endangered. I mean, you see it every day, right? We are endangered. We don't know when that time will come or not. And so, yeah, I'm a little obsessed with that.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that it's so cool that you are that there's just this, unabashed, just look at it in your poems, but also in such a beautiful and powerful way. Like we're not, going there in a poem or two and then kind of like running away from it. We're really getting into it. And, we can have these like vast, numbers of days where weird things are happening in our lives and we're feeling stressed, or we're binging like the Great British Bake Off, and life just seems like it goes on forever, but it doesn't. And I think it is, maybe on the one hand cliche, but not cliche. It's timeless, and it's important. Let's like think about like what is really important to us and what's actually going on in our lives. And I love that your poems bring us back and back and back to to the finiteness of life, and I think that's awesome.
And kids, I think kids think about death a lot. Once they realize that it exists, because it's like, what is that all about? But
Right.
the difference is, Kyle, that you wrote about it. I think that's unusual for somebody at that age. So you were a writer.
Yes, you were. And like good on young the young Kyle for not looking away from that, and for kind of diving right in, and kind of like a foreshadowing of the work to come. All right, and Amie, we've got this question here about the timing and pacing in this piece.
That's a great question, Anne. I think that I kind of, drew like a map thing, but I was thinking more about space than time. Can I show you something?
Yes, please.
The ending, I don't know if you can see, it's actually split. Like I wanted it to happen at the same time.
I love it.
So when to think about time and pacing, I was mostly thinking about like how so often it overlaps. Like there's an overlap between time and space.
Oh my God, I love that. Almost like a contrapuntal poem, lined up on both sides of the page.
Yeah. So I was trying to figure out like how you could build two separate strands that would then come together at the same time.
And so when you read that, do you read it across?
No. So I did it like, this is what Gus, you can't see this.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Okay.
And then Alice is in the other column. So I just did his and then hers. But I think the whole, I had the vision of that split ending before I wrote the beginning. So I think it went backwards, trying to construct it.
Oh my God. That I love how this question uncovered that fabulous detail about your formatting on the page. Because I mean, we definitely felt it as listeners, as I guess as readers, imagining the story. But I think if we were to see that on the page, that would just obviously add to that experience. That is so cool.
It's really
And
cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's so cool. And you did not start out writing it that way. It happened.
Yeah.
I I just think that's so cool. I mean, but I know how that happens too, because anytime I've ever, played with any timing things like that, it's sort of something that it emerges and then you're like, obviously, yes, it must be like
Right.
this. It
Right.
must. It's like, this is the perfect way. Okay. So, Kyle, I now want to get to the poetry question I have for you. I'm so interested to know about how you came to form formal poetry and how you got involved with things like the Westchester Poetry Conference, where I first met you, and also Carmine Street Metrics, which I know is predominantly formalist, and I believe it's for formalists, right?
Yeah. No. So when I started, I've wrote all my life, and then I'm working full time and have my own company, and so time was short, and 2 kids, and so then I finally decided, you know what, I need to just focus on this. I need to learn, but I was kind of too old to do an MFA. I thought, at that point, but you're never too old, right? So I started working with a poet locally here, Robert Crawford, who happens to be a really fabulous formal poet, 2-time Howard Nemeroff Sonnet Award, which is a big deal in the sonnet world, but I know
I know.
winner. And so I started working with him. And part of that process was like, he just, I was trained in like, a sonnet is this, and it's, and it's, the meter, the rhyme. And so I always say that, you have to learn the rules to break the rules.
Yes.
Sonnets are kind of taking off in different directions these days, which I find really fascinating. And, but, I think it's good to learn the formal rules and then figure out, how to play with them.
Absolutely.
So I started doing a lot of formal work but also, free verse always too. I think I'm like, well, you do both, right? So I think, yeah. Well, they're like, most formalists are like that. They're kind of exclusive usually, or they're free verse poets. It's blending a little bit more now. But I was always writing both. And so I mean, I love it. I think that form can actually be freeing. A lot of people think, well, it puts you in a box. Why would you want to do that? It's forced or whatever. And that's the challenge, right? Is to make sure that it's not forced. And so you have to make decisions that actually take you somewhere you would never have thought of before. Yes. Do you find that? Yes. So
exactly. This is something that that Kim always said, that Baron, my various mentors always said to me, like, actually, form is going to kind of push you to these areas of creativity where, maybe in a free verse you wouldn't necessarily go there, because you could just kind of grab, whatever is kind of most immediate. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I love that about form. And I do write in form here and there. And I definitely, I would love to do more of it. Amie, you had
I wanted to ask Kyle a question. Do you think about form first and then the poem comes, or do you have like the idea in your head and then you're like, you know what, this is actually very much a pantoum or something?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. And usually, like, sometimes I'll have a poem that I feel like there's something there, but it's just not working. It's boring. It's just not right. And I think, okay, what if I put it in a form? And so, yeah, maybe if it's certain repeating patterns are happening in there anyway, to go and do a pantoum or to look at a ghazal, or, if it's an argument, putting it into a sonnet format. And I did learn, over the years that like the worst thing you can do for a sonnet is like start in free verse and try to make it into a sonnet. Like, but yeah, so if it's a sonnet, usually I'll have an idea first and I'll start writing it in a sonnet, because otherwise it's really hard to kind of go the other way. But
like push something into a sonnet. Yeah.
So I have a question for Amie. I read your bio, to everyone, and you have your MFA in creative nonfiction, and yet here you are writing all these short stories. So, how does that work? Were you a closet fiction writer, and now you're out of the closet? You always writing fiction?
No, I think I'm not very good at fiction, but I was writing so much nonfiction that I needed a break.
That sounded like the most exquisite and imaginative nonfiction. I knew it was fiction, but I wanted this to be the story of your grandparents. It weirdly it felt like totally masterful creative nonfiction. I think it's fabulous. I think it's really fabulous, and I think all of that nonfiction, stuff, for lack of a better word in the moment, has influenced you beautifully in these stories. Continue, please.
I think you said whatever I was thinking in a far better, more beautiful way.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Well, this was just a project I was working on a longer, full-length creative nonfiction project, and then I was tired of myself.
Okay. So you're going to write about these made-up people who are sort of based on real people, but more or less made up, and here you go. You're on your way.
Hopefully, maybe.
Well, you might have to try poetry next, because I felt like it was so lyrical and beautiful. And
I envy all of you poets. I don't have that poet bone in my body, but I love to read it, and I love to read poetry while I'm trying to write fiction to figure out sentences, and I could just.
It's very poetic.
Incredibly lyrical, and I'm always referencing Charles Rafferty, who was a returning guest last week, who really, it feels very comfortable blurring the line between, and he doesn't know where the line is sometimes, between flash fiction and prose poetry, and many parts of the piece that you read tonight really felt exactly like that. Just totally poetic, and very, very lyrical narrative. Just really gorgeous. Chris,
I think
it is time for our famous last question.
It is indeed.
Double question.
Famous last question, which is we just ask you for what we call a pearl of wisdom for the writers out there. Something you've learned that you pass along to those who are struggling in this endeavor, and to go with that, a book recommendation, anything that strikes your fancy lately. So,
Amie, I think is ready for this.
Oh, no! Actually, there's a bookshelf over my head.
That's where mine is too. That's so funny. Mine's up there.
So Kyle, we're a pearl of wisdom first, and then that recommendation, or the other way around. Doesn't matter as long as we get both.
I would say that the world that we're in now is so busy with so much noise in many different levels, right? A lot of language, a lot of things going on all the time. And I think for writers, we need to get back to just a little bit of solitude or quiet. And so not to skip those moments, and to take them, and to feel like that we all deserve those moments, so that we can really focus on our craft. And maybe some people don't care. Maybe you can write really well if it's, if it is a lot going on. But I always find I do best when if I'm on a long car ride with silence, and a poem will always come.
Absolutely. That reminds me of St. Augustine, Thomas Merton, and Mary Oliver. That has given me all of those different vibes in that fabulous Pearl of Wisdom. And I totally agree with you, Kyle. Yes.
St.
And
Augustine, he was known for riding in his car.
No. Was it by horseback then, or anyway, whatever it might have been?
Well, I hope you're not like writing it down while you're driving. But,
No comment. No comment.
Oh.
I actually have a poem in Lucen that kind of.
Well.
Oh my God.
Remember, Amy's story didn't end well.
You're right. You're right.
People are texting and driving, Kyle.
No, it's actually raining.
Driving.
Okay. Book recommendation, anything.
I love Obit by Victoria Cheng. It's an amazing book of poetry, and I would recommend it to everyone.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Kyle. And Amie, your pearl of wisdom and your recommendation?
My pearl of wisdom, I think will have something to do with that genre blending thing. The idea that it's all genre is just a construct.
Oh, I like that.
So blending the 2 or 3 or 4.
Correct.
Like feel like to do it, to just
yes.
mess it all up and be messy. And I'm trying to so I'm rereading Diane Seuss's Frank Sonnets, which I was thinking about a lot listening to Kyle read, just because I don't know. That's a great one. And I'm also reading Men and Apparitions by Lynn Tillman right now. And, I have such I desperately want to write a book, like an adult book with pictures, not a graphic novel, but like a picture. Yes, and she has so much thought about like the connection between visual and language.
I like that.
So I would recommend that. It's really wonderfully weird and smart and messy.
Really smart.
Yeah,
that is so great. That is so great, Amie. And even in your pearl of wisdom right there, genre is just a construct. You are being a bit of a poet there, even though you are. You definitely are. That's excellent pearls, and from both of you, excellent recommendations, and such fabulous readings from both of you. A round of applause one more time for Kyle Potvin and Amie Souza Reilly.
Brava.
Thanks
for having me.
Thank you. This has been fun.
Thanks.
Kyle, it was so nice to meet you.
You too, Amie. I look forward to seeing more of your work.
You too.
You guys need to hang.
Yes.
Well, now we're Twitter friends.
It's the perfect opportunity, and we really hope that you will be back to join us again in the future. And everybody in the audience, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an awesome evening. Make sure to come back next week, Chris, for
next week we have FUMFA alum Jessica Tumio and special guest Chris Abate.
Gonna be awesome. Yes. Well, thank you so much to our readers again and to our audience. We'll see you next Sunday.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.